I destroyed my work project, and I hope I get fired. Alright, listen up, let me tell you about my current job. It's been a wild ride, the kind of thing you see in movies, except it's real and it's happening to me. I've been working at this company for 2 years now, and let me tell you, it hasn't been a walk in the park. When I first started, everyone thought I was the best thing since sliced bread. An incredible asset to the company, they called me. But fast forward to now, and my job description seems to have been demoted to professional babysitter. And no, I'm not exaggerating. You see, this company is owned by a group of people, but the one calling the shots is a relative of the higher-ups. This guy has never had to work for anyone but his own mother, who happens to be the owner of the company. Imagine being so spoiled that you never learned to tie your own shoes. That's this guy. He can't do anything for himself, literally. Bluetooth is his arch nemesis. To call him a moron would be an understatement. Now, you might think I'm being dramatic, but I'm not. Just last week, I got a call from him while he was driving. Hey, he said, I'm driving right now, but I can't figure out where I am. Can you help? Yep, that really happened. I'm not talking about figuring out where he was in life. I mean he literally couldn't figure out where he was physically. So, I had to track his phone, find his location, and then find a store near him that sold the thing he needed, which he couldn't even remember the name of. After all that, I had to guide him there like a human GPS. This is my life, 50 plus phone calls a day from this guy, each one more ridiculous than the last. It's like living in a sitcom written by someone who's never had a real job. Here's an example. Did you get my email? He'll ask. Yes, I replied to it and answered all your questions, I'll say. Oh, good, he'll respond. Read it out to me. So, I'll spend the next 5 minutes reading an email to a grown man who somehow forgot how to read. And he's happy, for about 2 hours, anyway. Then I get a scathing email from him. Why did you email me again? We just talked about this on the phone. This is wasting my time. It's enough to drive a person crazy. My actual job, gone. My official title might not say personal assistant, but that's what I am now. It wasn't a transition I wanted, but my opinion doesn't really matter in this company. To make matters worse, the company's bleeding money like a stuck pig. You would think the boss would be on top of this, trying to figure out what's wrong, but this guy can't even operate a coffee machine that we've had for 6 years. Aside from my babysitting duties, I also try to assist other departments whenever possible. This gives me access to various software and lets me see how things actually run in this company. And guess what? I found some problems, serious problems that were costing us a lot of money. These issues stemmed from things like purchasing, distribution, and a general lack of proper price adjustments. It was bad. I'm talking, we're going to go bankrupt, bad. I went to another department manager who was, shall we say, impressed with my findings. So impressed that he took me straight to the CEO who, by the way, is the boss's mother. We need to put foot on this, he said. She can help us fix this. Guess what Mom said? Nope, not happening. Foot is far too valuable as a personal assistant. Can't spare her. I know, right? She actually said that. Turns out Mommy Dearest wants to retire, which means Boss Baby needs to learn the business. Apparently, all he needs is more projects to understand how to run a company. You can't make this stuff up. Next thing I know, Boss Baby calls me into his office and tells me I need to work on fixing all these problems that I found, which makes sense, since I found them. Here's the kicker. He tells me to give him all my notes and then he will present it to the board as his own work. The audacity of this guy. He then proceeds to leave for the day and calls me later to ask what kind of mustard he likes best on his sandwiches. Followed by a lecture, obviously, because the answer I gave him was clearly wrong, and I should be paying attention to such important details. Sigh. So, what did I do? I hung up the phone, took all my notes, those detailed notes about how the company is losing millions, and I shredded them. Gone. Kaput. Oops. Sorry, I'm just an idiot who can't handle doing any investigation work into our financial records. And I definitely don't understand that your profit margins dropped from 32% to 18% while we're giving distributors a 46% discount. Nope, that's way over my head. Let's see how Boss Baby explains that to the board. Good luck figuring out why we keep having layoffs, buddy. In the meantime, I'll be busy making a note of what kind of mustard he likes on his sandwiches, which is clearly a much better use of my time. After all, as Boss Baby himself once said, maybe one day you'll be capable, like me, if you keep working at it. Yeah, maybe, but until then, I'm dreaming of getting fired. It would be a blessing at this point. Well, since shredding my project, a few things have happened. First, no, I did not get fired. Lectured, yes. Told I was a disappointment. You bet. Apparently, after giving it some thought, Boss Baby decided fixing the company's financial problems wasn't actually that important after all. And, of course, shredding the documents wasn't a huge loss either. Foot, he said, You were looking for problems that weren't there. You need to keep your nose clean regarding company matters. In other words, don't try to fix things that I'm supposed to be fixing. The phone calls, those never stopped. In fact, they're getting worse. Like this gem from the other day. Hey Foot, it's raining, he says. Yep, I reply. Did you get more rain at your house than at mine? I don't know. Don't you measure your rain? No, well you should, then you'll know how much rain there was. Do you measure yours? I ask. Nah, we just water the garden when it's dry. Then why did you even ask me? I thought if you measured your rain, you could tell me how much you got, and I could guess how much I got, and then we could see who got more rain, he explained. But now we can't, so whatever. Anything else? I asked, hoping the answer was no. Nah, that's it, I'll be at work soon. I hung up the phone, took a deep breath, and then went back to my novel. That's right, you heard that correctly, a novel. Here's the thing. I don't get paid nearly enough for this nonsense. So, I've decided to stop doing my job. Or at least most of it. My days are now spent doing the bare minimum to avoid getting caught, and using the rest of my time on things that actually matter, like writing my novel. I'm also taking a ton of online courses that are related to my actual career, catching up on Reddit, and obsessively checking job listings. Oh, and I make a lot of spreadsheets about completely random things. Helps me stay sane, you know. I've come to the realization that I'm probably not going to get fired at this point. Not because it's impossible, but because I honestly don't think they can afford to pay me severance. It's gotten to the point that they've warned us that our paychecks might start bouncing soon. They said they're going to start writing us manual checks and told us to check with the bank to see if there's even money in the account before we try to cash them. Yep, that's how bad it is. As for the company finances, still hemorrhaging money. Of course, this didn't stop me from asking for access to more sales orders, even though I'm supposedly not allowed to meddle. What I found confirmed what I already knew. We were selling most of our products for less than it cost to make them. I took my findings to the CEO. Guess what she said? That's right, my baby boy will figure it all out eventually. He just needs more practice. Apparently, practice includes coming into my office to ask for help with his suspenders while wearing nothing but tighty-whities. True story. Giving up on real pens and using only crayons. Yeah, I replaced all the pens in his office with crayons. No regrets. Filling the entire building with a bathroom spray that he hates. Bought enough to last a year, so there's no getting rid of it. Getting his office chair strung up from the overhead crane by the guys in the shop. They were more than happy to help. Having his authorization removed from all vendor accounts. I contacted every vendor I have a working relationship with and said we needed at least 3 signatures for anything he wanted to do. Destroying my notes about how to fix our ancient inventory system. I had it working perfectly, but Boss Baby deemed it unnecessary, so into the shredder it went. Listening to music and podcasts all day, despite it being against the rules. Taking extra long breaks, sometimes disappearing for an hour at a time. Taking a week off with only 5 hours notice and not getting fired for it. Signing my emails with increasingly ridiculous job titles. Today's title, Unicorn Wrangler and Wizard Assistant. And as I'm sitting here on Reddit, updating everyone on this wild ride, I've come to realize something. I'll survive this. This company, though, they're not going to make it. As for the mental scars, those will probably stay with me forever. Oh, and let's not forget, I'm not paid nearly enough for any of this. Seriously. Next story. The animals sought refuge in my house during a blizzard. I think they were running from more than just the cold. I barely made it home in time. One minute I was singing along to the radio, the next I was staring at the most frightening storm clouds I'd ever seen. I was born and raised in Vermont, so I knew a thing or two about snowstorms, but these clouds were dark and looked truly bad. They were blowing in from over the mountains, making me feel uneasy. I got to my house and quickly jumped out of my car. The wind hit my face like a cold punch, making a howling sound in my ears. I ran up the steps, so glad to be inside my house. Luke was standing by the window in the living room, looking out at the mountains. By the time I walked over to him, I couldn't even see a few streets away. It seemed like we were going to be stuck inside for the evening. You made it just in time, Luke said. It came out of nowhere, I said. Before I could even put down my bag, I heard the doggy door open. We didn't have a pet, but Rigatoni, the neighborhood cat, came to visit us pretty often. Luke even gave her a silly name. We saw her trot into the living room, leaving muddy footprints across the floor. Ah, the serial couch surfer is back, Luke said with a smile. He knelt down and started petting her. Too cold out there for ya, little one? He asked, and the cat purred happily in response. Tony liked Luke a lot, but she wasn't very friendly to other people. Luke had a special way with animals. I'll make us some dinner, Luke said, standing up. Thank goodness, I'm starving, I said. I wasn't talking to you, Luke laughed as he walked to the kitchen to find some cat food for Tony. A little while later, Luke and I sat down to eat dinner. Just as we took our first bites, the doggy door opened again. I raised an eyebrow at Luke. It was weird to see another visitor so soon after Tony showed up. Who's that? I asked, looking at Luke, but before he could respond, a big border collie dog came bounding into the dining room. He was barking really loudly, and it sounded like he was worried about something. That's Mrs. Johnson's dog, I said, getting up from my seat. Tucker, right, I see her walking him all the time. I walked over to the dog and crouched down. He looked scared, with his head low and his tail tucked between his legs. Usually, Tucker was a really friendly dog, but he growled when I tried to pet him. He was being protective. He's usually a lot calmer than this, I said to Luke. I'll give Mrs. Johnson a call, Luke said, going to find his phone. I sat back down and watched Tucker. He had stopped barking, but he was whimpering softly. He wasn't moving much anymore, but he still looked scared. I checked his body for any injuries, but I couldn't see anything wrong with him. Do you have signal? Luke shouted from the other room. I took my phone out to check. It was totally dead. We always had cell service in this area, and I didn't even remember the last time I'd lost it. I tried to restart my phone, walked around the house to different spots, and turned airplane mode on and off, but it still didn't work. If it was happening to both of us, there was probably a problem with the service, and we couldn't fix that. I was going to ask Luke if he had Wi-Fi on his phone when I heard a scratching sound. I followed the sound to the bathroom. There, by the bathroom window, was a small fluffy animal. It was pushing on the window glass with its paws. It was like it was trying really hard to get inside. What in the world? I said. The little creature didn't even seem to notice me. I got closer and realized that it had broken through the screen on the window. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, no nothing. At least the lights are still on, Luke said, joining me at the window. Is that a weasel? Luke asked. He was really good with animals, so I knew he'd know what it was. It's a marten, Luke said, shaking his head. Cool, I said. I was about to compliment him on knowing so much about animals, but then I saw the worried look in his eyes. Don't ask me what you're thinking about asking me, he said, looking at me with a worried expression. Please, I said. Martens are endangered, we have to save it. This isn't Noah's Ark, Luke. We can't save every animal in Vermont, I said. Besides, this little jerk looks sick. I swear it stopped pushing on the glass for a second and looked at me like it was mad. Then it went right back to trying to get inside. There's something weird about how desperate it is to get in, Luke said. It's probably freezing to death out there. We argued back and forth for a while, but eventually I agreed to let it in. I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy about the way the little guy was throwing himself at the window. I opened the window and let the marten squeeze through the hole in the screen. The little creature wasn't alone though. Before I could close the window, a bunch of mice, about 20 of them, squeezed in after the marten. They were hiding on the sill, and they looked like fluffy white patches of snow. They scurried out onto the floor when I opened the window, and I jumped back, startled, when one of them landed right on my foot. I closed the window again, being careful not to step on any more mice, but just as I did, a little red bird flew inside. It looked like a cardinal. It pushed through the gap between the screen and the window frame before I could get it closed. What the heck? I said, shocked by all the new guests in our home. I ran after the animals, heading to the dining room, where I could hear them all scurrying. There, besides Tucker and the new arrivals, were a cat and 2 dogs I didn't recognize. I saw them huddle in a corner. It seemed like they had just come through the doggy door. Luke, I yelled, lock the doggy door. What in the world is going on? Luke asked as he came into the dining room, confused. I couldn't explain it. We'd had lots of storms before, but this was different. All the animals were scared. They looked like they were running away from something. The dogs whimpered. The mice squeaked. Even the cardinal was chirping sadly. Rigatoni was the only one who looked normal. I had to shoo her away from the mice, who were hiding under the china cabinet. I took a deep breath. The storm raged outside. The snow was thick, blocking out everything except for the area right around our house. It was hard to even see the streetlights outside our windows. It felt strange, almost like I was under a spell. Luke, I said. He came to stand next to me at the window. Is it just me or is the window warm? Luke placed his hand on the window. He didn't say anything, but I saw a worried expression on his face. What does that mean? I asked, feeling cold inside even though the house was starting to get warm. I don't know. We stood in silence, listening to the wind howls outside. It sounded so loud because everything else seemed quiet, like it had been muted. The house felt too still. I didn't want to open any windows or doors, but I also didn't want to get too hot in the house. Just as I was about to go check if all the windows and doors were closed tight, Luke pointed at something outside. I saw a large, black shape moving slowly toward us. It looked like something I'd never seen before. It was big, but its shape was odd. It had a strange way of moving. The shape got closer to our porch light. It was a black bear. But it didn't look normal. It was missing part of its lower jaw and one of its back legs. The bear's wounds were fresh. It had blood all over it. It was walking slowly, wobbling, and its steps were painful. It stopped close to our window, just a few feet away. The bear stared at us. It looked like it was pleading with us. I looked back at it, scared. Then the bear collapsed onto its side, bleeding. It was only taking slow, shallow breaths, and then it stopped breathing altogether. The bear's eyes never left us, not even when it died. We just sat there for a while, in silence, watching. You think, Luke said, breaking the silence. You think that's what all the animals were scared of? I hoped so, but I felt like there was more to the story. It felt like the animals were running from something even worse. I think we should get away from the windows, I said. We walked into the middle of the house, away from the windows. As we went, the lights flickered a few times and then went out, plunging the house into darkness. The animals became even more scared. They started making loud squeaking and whimpering noises. I ran to the kitchen and got 2 flashlights. I gave one to Luke, and then we went to the dining room and sat on the floor with our backs to the wall. Tony, still sleeping in Luke's arms, seemed totally fine. She wasn't even scared. I couldn't understand it. She had been at our house before the storm, but all the other animals seemed to have been outside in the snow for a long time. They must have seen something terrible outside. If they did, could it be the same thing that hurt the bear? Hey, do you hear that? Luke said, his voice trembling a bit. I listened carefully. It was totally silent. I couldn't hear anything at all. No wind, no animals, not even any sounds from outside. It was like everything had stopped, like the whole world was holding its breath. I turned my flashlight off. I didn't want to do anything that might attract attention. Then, I heard a voice. Hello, it was clear as day. Someone was calling to us from outside our house. Hello, anyone in there? The voice said, calm and carefree. I need some help. Luke shifted, like he was going to get up, but I grabbed his arm and pulled him back down to the floor. I wasn't going to let him go outside. I couldn't believe how quiet it was. I could even hear the crunching of footsteps in the snow as the person walked outside. Please, the voice said. Please, I really need help. Can I just come in for a minute? It's freezing out here. I held onto Luke's arm tighter. It was the same voice that had sounded so calm before. Something about the voice made me shiver. It felt like there was something bad about it. Luke took my hand in his. I heard the footsteps getting closer. Come on now, don't you have room for one more? The voice said, right by the window. I closed my eyes, too afraid to look at whatever was outside. I felt Luke breathe in sharply. For what felt like an eternity, we stayed perfectly still. Then I heard a soft chuckle, right outside the window. The footsteps moved away from our house. And then the wind came back. It roared like a hungry animal, loud enough to shake our whole house. The wind came back with the silence it had stolen. Luke's hand went limp in mine, but I held on, my eyes closed tight. After a while, I finally opened my eyes again. Are you okay? I asked Luke, but he didn't say anything. I tried again, a little louder. Luke. I turned my flashlight back on, and I saw Luke staring at the window. His face was full of fear. It was a look I'd never seen before. He was pale and stiff. He wouldn't even look at me, even when I tried to get his attention. He just stared at the window, frozen in fear. I carried him to the car and drove him to the hospital as fast as I could. The doctors said it was a stroke. I couldn't believe it. Luke was only 29, and he always took good care of himself. He didn't even smoke. Why would this happen to him? But the doctors didn't have any other explanation. I stayed by his side every day and every night, hoping and praying for a miracle, taking care of everything he needed. But there was no miracle. 5 years have passed since that awful storm. Rigatoni, the cat, is still alive somehow, and she always seems to make Luke feel a little better when she comes to visit. She's sleeping on his chest now, as I'm writing this, taking care of him in her own way. I'm glad to have her around. It feels like she keeps me connected to that night, even though I try not to think about it too much. I think about Tucker, the dog who ran away after the storm and was never seen again. I think about the marten and the mice, and I think about the bear. They all acted like they were running from something really terrible, something that scared them more than anything else. And I think about the look on Luke's face. Maybe he saw something he wasn't supposed to see, something that scared him so badly that it made him sick. I look at my husband, the love of my life, and I feel sad for what we lost that night. I wish I knew what he saw. If I had looked outside, if I had been brave enough, would I have seen what he saw? What did you see? I ask him, like I have 1,000 times before. He never answers. The storm that night changed everything. It brought fear and confusion, and it left Luke in a way I never could have imagined. It made me realize that the world can be a scary place, full of things we don't understand. I can't explain what happened that night, but I'll never forget the looks on the animals' faces. They were terrified, and the voice that called to us from the dark, so calm and indifferent. It wasn't like any human voice I had ever heard before. I don't think the doctors really understand what happened to Luke either. They just told me he had a stroke, but maybe something else happened to him. Maybe he saw something that changed him forever. Something he can't tell me about. Maybe the world is stranger than we know. Rigatoni purrs on Luke's chest, her soft breathing almost lulling me back into a sense of peace. But there's a part of me that always watches for the shadows. The wind howls outside, and I feel a familiar chill creep down my spine. That night, something touched our world. And something left Luke behind. But the story, like the storm, isn't over. It lingers, a cold shadow in the back of my mind. And I know, with a certainty I can't explain, that whatever it was, whatever we saw, is still out there. And someday, it will return. The storm was more than just a weather event. It felt like a crack in the world, a brief glimpse into something else, something hidden. The silence after the wind stopped, the warmth of the window, the bear's pleading gaze, the strange voice from the darkness, it all felt off. Something that didn't belong in our world. There's still so much I don't know, so much that I want to understand. But maybe some things are better left hidden. But sometimes, when I look at Luke, sleeping in the hospital bed, his eyes blank and lifeless, I see that same terror I saw in the animals. And a part of me wonders, if it returns, if it shows itself again, will we be ready? Will we be strong enough to face it? Or will it take more than we know? Every night, I watch for the lights to flicker. Every time the wind howls outside, I remember the storm. Every time the door creaks, every time I see something move in the darkness, my heart jumps. It's been 5 years, but the fear never goes away. The world is still out there, waiting.